Welcome everyone to session number 252 of Kevin Reed's A Course in Miracles. Today we are still in the Manual for Teachers, the third book contained in the course, all right? The text, the workbook for students, and your Manual for Teachers. All right. And we are still in the section called the question. They're all posed as questions. What are the characteristics of God's teachers? All right, so we have gone through trust and honesty and tolerance. Right, and now we get to what we're going to cover today is gentleness and joy. So these are characteristics of the teacher of God. Now, at this point, Jesus is talking about what he calls the advanced teacher of God, right? Starting with the trust, the development of trust. As we develop our trust in allowing Jesus and Holy Spirit to guide us, putting our complete trust in allowing them to show us corrected perception, to show us what peace looks like, right? To help us with forgiveness, the fact that we don't see any separate interests anymore. As we work our way up that ladder of trust, when we get to the top and we fully and always trust in the oneness, the Spirit, the Holy Spirit, we trust in Jesus as our guide, our brother, we realize that we are that and we are advanced teachers of God. Even though we may still be in form, we know that we are not this form. All right? So we work our way up to that point. And when we are at that point, these are the characteristics. All right? And today's characteristics, all right, we will focus on gentleness and joy. And I just take these little bits at a time because just think about them. And they're wonderful. They're so loving, they're so gentle. All right, and when you dwell on it, you will feel the gentleness and the joy. So let's just begin. All right, section 4, IV, gentleness. Harm is impossible for God's teachers. They can neither harm nor be harmed. Harm is the outcome of judgment. It is the dishonest act that follows a dishonest thought. It is a verdict of guilt upon a brother, and therefore on oneself. It is the end of peace and the denial of learning. It demonstrates the absence of God's curriculum and its replacement by insanity. No teacher of God but must learn, and fairly early in his training, that harmfulness completely obliterates his function from his awareness. It will make him confused, fearful, angry, and suspicious. It will make the Holy Spirit's lessons impossible to learn. Nor can God's teacher be heard at all, except by those who realize that harm can actually achieve nothing. No gain can come of it. All right. So he says harm is impossible for God's teachers. They can either be harmed and they can't harm. Right? Because harm is the outcome of judgment. All right? And the original judgment is that I am individual. I have separate interests. And I just go on judging everybody else after that. But when you reach that awareness, that higher awareness, the highest awareness, you realize that you're not this physical form, so therefore you can't be harmed. All right? And you can't harm because you don't even think about that. All right? You don't even think about that because you're not judging anymore. All right? Because harm is the outcome of judgment. It is a verdict of guilt upon your brother. Right? And the first thing I have to do is put the verdict of guilt on myself, and then I project it. Right? So the first judgment is on myself. I destroyed heaven, I wrecked God, and now I'm guilty. Got to get away. You got to find the guilty person. Place it on. It wasn't me, it was him. So, it is the end of peace and the denial of learning. All right? It's the outcome of judgment. Judgment is the end of peace and the denial of learning. All right? It demonstrates the absence of God's curriculum and its replacement by insanity. God's curriculum is basically here in form, it's forgiveness. In our abstract spirit form, it's just the extension of everything everywhere. The extension of love. But here in form, the function is forgiveness. To be willing to see no separate interests. To be willing to see past the machinations of form and get right to the truth. I'm willing to be shown the truth. Right? That's the function here. Right? So if I'm judging that I'm separate from the oneness, that's the end of peace. And it demonstrates the absence of forgiveness, God's curriculum. And it demonstrates the replacement of God's curriculum with insanity. And I'm telling you, it just wafted over me. I was watching something about current affairs and the enormous milieu of insanity. Right? It was quite unnerving to realize, oh wait. But whenever I feel that way, of course, I know I have the opportunity to ask Jesus, help me to see correctly. Help me to be peaceful in the midst of this dream of insanity. Okay? And by practicing that, our trust grows and grows. It becomes reinforced. And we make our way up the ladder. Right? So no teacher of God, that's sentence 8, paragraph 1. No teacher of God but must learn, and fairly early in his training, that harmfulness completely obliterates his function from his awareness. All right? So the judgment. We're going to use the word harmfulness now because that's what we're talking about, gentleness. All right? So the judgment that I'm different, I'm an individual, I've harmed myself. So that harmfulness completely obliterates my function. When I'm in that thought system, I am totally unaware of my function, which is forgiveness, which is stopping the projection and having my perception corrected, and being willing to do that. I'm just reminded of a line from the text or from someplace in the Course, where Jesus says, mastery is not readiness. So you don't have to be a master of these things to be ready. Right? He says willingness. All right, that's the readiness. Just be willing to see correctly. Be willing to be shown the truth, the innocence. Be willing to see past the form. That's the readiness. Right? But once I've chosen to believe I'm separate, all that is completely obliterated from my awareness. And then he says it will make him confused. So it'll make you confused, fearful, angry, and suspicious. All those things. I mean, that's how we spend our day. If you look at it, we go through all those phases during the day. Or at least during the week. I mean, with me, I guess it's a daily basis. All right? And that last one, you're suspicious. You know, he's being nice to us. Right? You know, it's like you're paranoid. Everybody's out to get you. All right? Especially, well, anywhere you live. Anywhere you live. But I do notice it in Manhattan. I mean, you know, even people that are obviously looking for directions. All right. I mean, if you walk up to them and you say, "Can I help you find something?" Most people would take a step back first because they're suspicious. It's the mindset. I don't blame them. You know, I don't blame them. I mean, it says New York's got a reputation. Other places got reputations too. But that's the way most people spend their day. All right? Confused, fearful, angry, and suspicious. We roller coaster through the day. And it makes the Holy Spirit's lessons impossible to learn. Now, the Holy Spirit's lessons, basically, is that everyone is either extending love or calling out for the love they think is missing. Even the worst people, they're calling out for the love they think is missing. And it's a trap to think, oh yeah, they're just calling out for the love. All right. It's better to go inside and ask, how can I see this person correctly? All right. Because you just can't let loose cannons just roll down the street. You know. Because we're living here in form. If you need to take an action, you can, but come from the foundation of peace. Come from the foundation of Holy Spirit and Jesus. All right. So once we've denied that I'm part of the oneness, that's one of the things that happens. It makes the Holy Spirit's lessons impossible to learn. Right? That everybody's either calling out for love or extending love. All right? Nor can God's teachers be heard, God's teacher, all right, the Holy Spirit, Jesus, be heard at all, except by those who realize that harm can actually achieve nothing. No gain can come of it. Okay. Remember, he said harm is the outcome of judgment. All right. So God's teacher, the Holy Spirit, Jesus, can't be heard except by those who realize that judgment can actually achieve nothing. No gain can come of it. Okay? And that judgment implies that I'm projecting guilt onto the other. All right? No gain can come of it. Therefore, God's teachers are wholly gentle. They need the strength of gentleness, for it is this that the function of salvation becomes easy. It is in this gentleness, that the function of salvation becomes easy. To those who would do harm, it is impossible. To those to whom harm has no meaning, it is merely natural. What choice but this has meaning to the sane? Who chooses hell when he perceives a way to heaven? And who would choose the weakness that must come from harm in place of the unfailing, all-encompassing, and limitless strength of gentleness? The might of God's teachers lies in their gentleness, for they have understood their evil thoughts came neither from God's Son nor his Creator. Thus did they join their thoughts with him who is their source. And so their will, which always was his own, is free to be itself. Okay. So the gentleness just comes naturally. All right. Because there's strength in the gentleness. All right. The gentleness comes from the trust that I am one with God. Right? I am not this body. I am an abstract spirit. I am a thought in the mind of God. Right? And from that awareness, you realize that no harm can come to you because you're not a body. And that strength gives you the gentleness. You can be gentle with everyone. Right? You can be gentle and kind and forgiving to everyone. Right? Now, you can't jump the shark, I guess that's the saying goes these days. You can't run ahead and saying, oh, I'm not actually a body, so I don't care what you do. That's not it. You have to have that awareness. All right? You have to have the same awareness that Jesus had when he came to preach his message of love your brother, love your neighbor as yourself. You have to have that same awareness. Right. So it's not that, oh, nothing can hurt me. When I'm not at that stage. Right. So we're working our way up the ladder. In other words, don't deny your body's needs. Don't deny your body's needs. Oh, I don't need that bandage. I'm not a body. You will. Pretty soon, you're going to see, well, life gets a little harder. Life here in form gets a little harder with an infection. All those things. Oh, I don't have to worry about, red lights, green lights. I'm not a body. Right, try that, especially in Manhattan. Even if you're cross at the right time, you're liable to get it. But that's neither here nor there. Jesus is talking about everything that goes on in the mind, the awarenesses that we get as we climb the ladder of trust. And once we're at the top and we completely have invested our trust in the oneness, in the memory of who we are, then all these other things just rise up. I can be gentle. I'm not worried. Not worried. All right? I mean, if I want to stay in the dream for a while and I think I have, I'm still here to complete my functions, then I want to take care of my body. Just take care of it. Don't obsess over it. Just take care of yourself. All right? As Dr. Wapnick would always say, be normal, okay? So, therefore, we know that judgment is the problem. All right? If we're judging, then we can't be gentle. Judgment is the harm. Right? And we're trying to eliminate the harm and become gentle. So, therefore, God's teachers are wholly gentle. They need the strength of gentleness. For it is in this that the function of salvation becomes easy. So in that gentleness, in that awareness of what you are, the process of salvation becomes easy. The function of salvation. In other words, relinquishing, escaping from the ego's thought system. Right? And everyone comes with you because the minds are joined. Right? They need the strength of gentleness, for it is in this that the function of salvation becomes easy. To those who would do harm, it is impossible. Right? To those to whom harm has no meaning, it is merely natural. Right? So the gentleness is natural. To those of us to whom harm has no meaning, judgment has no meaning. Right? Judgment is ridiculous. We've come to realize that. Because we have realized the oneness. Remember, this is the top of the ladder. And you will get there. Guaranteed. It's just telling you what you're going to experience. So to those to whom harm has no meaning, it is merely natural. What choice but this has meaning to the sane? What choice but this, right? To choose the oneness, to choose the non-judgment, right? To choose that oneness, that innocence. Okay? And he says, what choice could have any meaning to the sane? Who chooses hell when he perceives a way to heaven? Right? Once we realize there is a way to see things differently, all right? He just says, hey, it just makes sense. You know, why would you choose a way to hell instead of heaven? And why would you choose the weakness that must come from harm in place of the unfailing, all-encompassing, and limitless strength of gentleness? Right? He says, who would choose the weakness that comes from the judgment, that comes from the belief that I'm separated from the oneness? All right? Who would choose that? Who would choose the weakness that must come from harm? All right? Judgment. Deciding you're separate. Who would choose the weakness from harm in place of? All right, so who would choose that in place of the unfailing, all-encompassing, and limitless strength of gentleness? The might of God's teachers lies in their gentleness, for they have understood their evil thoughts came neither from God's Son nor his Creator. Thus did they join their thoughts with him, who is their source. And so their will, which always was his own, is free to be itself. All right. All right, so the might of the teachers, God's teachers, lies in their gentleness, because they have understood that the evil thoughts that they thought existed, they thought they had, they're meaningless. They didn't come from anywhere. They don't exist. Right? They are illusions, figments of a sick imagination. And the imagination becomes sick when it judges itself as separate from the oneness. So the might of God's teachers lies in their gentleness, for they have understood their evil thoughts came neither from God's Son nor his Creator. They don't exist. They were made up. Thus did they join their thoughts with him who is their source. Thus, you join your thoughts with your Creator. And you are that, as Gangaji would say. You are that. And in that realization, you are gentle. And so their will, which always was his own, is free to be itself. And your true will, which is the same as God's, is to extend love everywhere, always. So, the next one, section 5, Roman numeral 5. The next characteristic, I forgot the word, is joy. All right. Joy is the inevitable result of gentleness. When you realize that you are that you are not this form, and you can be gentle and loving and forgiving, there's such a joy that rises. Joy is the inevitable result of gentleness. Gentleness means that fear is now impossible. And what could come to interfere with joy? The open hands of gentleness are always filled. The gentle have no pain. They cannot suffer. Why would they not be joyous? They are sure that they are beloved and must be safe. Joy goes with gentleness as surely as grief attends attack. God's teachers trust him, and they are sure his teacher goes before them, making sure no harm can come to them. They hold his gifts and follow in his way, because God's voice directs them in all things. Joy is their song of thanks, and Christ looks down on them in thanks as well. His need of them is just as great as theirs of him. How joyous it is to share the purpose of salvation. How joyous it is to share the purpose of salvation. And notice how he brilliantly goes back to trust. Everything rests on the trust. Right? God's teachers trust in him. Right? Sentence 9 in that paragraph. And they are sure his teacher goes before them. That's the Holy Spirit. Jesus, the teacher. Right? They're sure of it. Right? Making sure no harm can come to them. So we rest in that trust. And everything rises up from the trust once again. And the outcome is joy. Because we're sure that Jesus and Holy Spirit guide us in everything, in all things. They are sure his teacher goes before them, making sure no harm can come to them. They hold his gifts and follow in his way, because God's voice directs them in all things. These are metaphors. Spirit, the Holy Spirit, Jesus. They're metaphors for God's voice, as if God had a voice. Right? We have to remember the Course comes in an ego framework. We're using words to describe what's beyond words. All right. So his voice directs them in all things. And joy is their song of thanks. The experience of joy is just an experience of eternal gratitude, because we are one with our Creator, and our Creator guides us. Joy is their song of thanks. And Christ looks down on them in thanks as well. All right, another metaphor. They're talking about the Christ. They're talking about the innocence, the innocent offspring of the Creator. It's the eternal innocence looks down on us. All right, in thanks, thanking us. Thanks for joining me. All right. His need of them is just as great as theirs of him. All right. The oneness. All right. How joyous it is to share the purpose of salvation. How joyous it is to share that purpose. Of extending the idea of innocence, right? Extending the idea of innocence everywhere, throughout the mind. How joyous is that? All right. So gentleness and joy. And I'm going to leave it there, because I take these little bits, these characteristics. It's so nice to reread them and dwell on them, and to realize this is what you're about to experience constantly, with the practice of trust, with the development of trust, as he says. All right. Looking forward to the joyousness, and I'll see you next time. Bye now.